All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. Very sorry about the delay. This is what the screen is going to look like right now. We're so sorry that it's dark. We've tried to do everything that we can to figure out what's going on, and we haven't been able to do it. But this is a really important conversation that we don't want to delay. I'm just going to go ahead and let everybody that's with me do a quick introduction, and then we'll get right into this conversation, which is about the House Bill HR 6600 that has been proposed and why we need to all do everything we can to oppose it. I'll start with Nebiyu, and then we'll go to Mesfin, then Gennet, do a quick intros.
Hi, my name is Nebiyu Asfaw from Denver, Colorado, social justice advocate, co-founder of EADC.
Hi, my name is Mesfin Tegenu. I live in Pennsylvania. I'm the chairman of the American Ethiopians Public Affairs Committee.
Hi, and I'm Gennet Negussie. I live in Virginia. I'm from GLEAN, Global Ethiopian American Advocacy Nexus, and I'm also a member of APAC. Thank you for having us, Hermela.
Great, my pleasure. Thank you for making the time. So HR 6600 is a bill that was sponsored by Congressman Tom Malinowski from New Jersey, as well as Young Kim from California, David Cicilline, Brad Sherman, Gregory Meeks, Michael McCall. As you can see, this is a bipartisan effort to not solve the conflict in Ethiopia. One of the things that stuck out to me is the focus on the governments of Ethiopia and Eritrea, and I think maybe the TPLF was mentioned once when they were talking about making a State Department designation of genocide that could have been committed by all parties. If there's anyone that feels like they want to start, go ahead. But the larger, let's start with just the larger issue. What do you guys think? Why do you guys think this bill is misguided? Should we start with Mesfin?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Hermela. Well, I mean, and I don't know if, I'm not an expert in writing bills, honestly, but I don't understand the purpose of this bill. There is an ongoing conflict in that part of the world. A lot of work has been done to figure out what to do, and from day one, the offenders, the TPLF and its affiliated entities have refused to do anything close to what would make sense to bring peace to that place. And then here comes a bill by the gentleman that you showed us earlier, which actually puts further, flame into put gas into fire. It's what it looks like. So I mean, why? We don't know. Honestly, I have talked to 3 or 4 reporters today, and everybody has asked the same question. What is again? Why is this bill? We thought the president of the United States and the prime minister of Ethiopia spoke like maybe 3 weeks ago. There was this amazing Organization of African Unity conference that just happened, and now there were prisoners who were released. And then we thought the several of the activities that are supposed to be requested by the West has been done. And what is this again is what everybody's asking. So honestly, Hermela, I have no idea what the purpose of this bill is. It's very confusing, and it's just more like very powerful bill. And its goal, if it's enacted, will pretty much cripple the states, the countries in that area, probably including, in addition to Ethiopia and Eritrea, probably including Somalia and the neighboring countries as well.
Yeah, I think really interesting how broad it is in terms of who it considers as getting in the way of solving this conflict. They talk about any foreign persons. I think it's probably best for everybody to mute when they're not talking. I'm sorry, it's operating like a Zoom, but you know, part of what I think is interesting is it came at a time where we're all, or the community was debating, is the U.S. shifting? Is the prime minister giving into to Biden too much? Are we going back to where we started? Or is there really a shift within U.S. foreign policy? And this sort of just made it obvious, like we're going back to the same tactics. There was a moment where the president of the United States was speaking with the prime minister directly, and it felt like it was progress in a sense in terms of the diplomatic relations. And then you have this bill by Malinowski and a couple of other folks from the House Foreign Relations Committee that is once again refocusing all of its targeting to the governments of Ethiopia and Eritrea, and not saying a word about the armed insurgent group that has started this war and that continues this war. And it's really interesting that today, Nebiyu, I'll let you talk about this. An amnesty report came out talking about some of the atrocities committed by the Tigrayan rebels in August and September. So we keep getting this new information about what the armed insurgent groups have done in these different regions, but all the energy continues to get targeted at the governments of Ethiopia and Eritrea and anyone that seems to support them. Nebiyu, what do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, the Amnesty International report that came out today is the most damning report I've ever seen from Amnesty International, although they've released several reports before. What is being reported today is what we've already known, and several independent media, including yourself, Hermela, have been reporting for months. But the reality has been, unfortunately, that all these atrocities that are being committed by the TPLF have really gone with impunity. There has not been any concessions being demanded out of the TPLF. All the concessions that the State Department or the United States has been asking has been off of the Ethiopian government or the Eritrean government. And concessions have been made, like what Mesfin was saying earlier. Now, this bill comes in at a time that's just very curious. Even if you look at the title of the bill, to support stabilization, peace, and democracy efforts in Ethiopia. It is anything but that. The actual purpose of this bill has nothing to do with this title. That's just a sugarcoat. This is a sanction bill, and we have to be very clear about that. It is a sanction bill. It is not a bill that will bring about peace or security. Now, I would challenge anyone to find a single instance where sanctions have brought peace and stability to a country. In reality, what sanctions bring about is poverty, hunger, pain, and suffering. And that's exactly what this bill is going to do, destroy the livelihood of ordinary Ethiopians and drive the country into even a deeper and worse humanitarian crisis. So it will not help. I would argue that sanctions are the most insidious and pervasive form of modern warfare. And they're portrayed as gentler options than war. But the truth is that sanctions kill. They actually kill more than actual wars. And they affect the most vulnerable part of the population. That's who they devastate the most. And as we've seen throughout the past 5 decades, US sanctions have caused more death than bombs and guns. So this bill is extremely dangerous. If it passed, it will hurt Ethiopia, will hurt Eritrea, the Ethiopian people, the Ethiopian government, Ethiopians at home, the diaspora, Ethiopian businesses, and any country or international entity, organization that helps Ethiopia. It's so broad that anyone that has anything to do with Ethiopia can somehow be linked as aiding and abetting war or fueling war and be affected by the sanctions. So it's an extremely dangerous bill that really, I can't believe, has been written for Ethiopia. And that is why it's absolutely critical that not just Ethiopians and Eritreans, not just Africans, but American citizens need to be concerned that Congress is cooking up a bill like this against an ally like Ethiopia, and collectively we must resist this bill and make sure that it's pulled.
Yeah, I think sanctions, we continue to learn, are completely underrated in terms of their impact. There was a tweet that came out of the Ethiopian American Development Council account that said something along the lines of, this bill is trying to kill the relationship, the longstanding relationship the U.S. has had with Ethiopia. That tends to be the case when the United States leans to sanctions to get its way somewhere. There's this perception that it's supposed to pressure the government or the people it's targeting to do the right thing when it comes to human rights issues. But what it really does, and I think that they know that this is what they're doing, is that it punishes the average person, and it makes it difficult, like this bill says, to get international loans. It basically said the U.S. should leverage its power and make sure no international banks or funds are able to be given to the Ethiopian or the Eritrean government. So there's so many ways that it makes it impossible for countries to just do regular business, get basic things for their people. And the idea from the West is they're hoping that it makes the people turn against the leader, which doesn't happen at a time like this when the people are also aware of the United States role. So with that said, I want to move to Gennet. There are ways for us to do something about this, right? One of the ways is just to kind of dissect what it says so that everybody's clear on it. But there are also different campaigns to push back. What do you suggest people do so that they have a part in making sure that this bill does not get passed?
Yeah, and I also want to just add something to what Nebiyu and Mesfin had mentioned. I mean, what is most frustrating, as you mentioned, about this bill, HR 6600, is the couplet, in this conflict, the TPLF is barely mentioned in this bill, while the democratically elected government of Ethiopia is asked to do a lot. TPLF started the conflict, as we all know, continue attacking neighboring regions like Amhara, and it's prolonging the war and completely blocking aid from going into the Tigray region. So the fact that it just doesn't mention anything, the bill is not even balanced, and it's punitive, and also I believe it's counterproductive. If the U.S. is really concerned about humanitarian access and the situation in Ethiopia and wants to improve humanitarian access, the crisis in Ethiopia, if this bill passes, as you mentioned, is suspension. They talk about suspension of security assistance, which will weaken Ethiopian government and the Ethiopia, and further create instability, not just in Ethiopia, and for the whole Horn of Africa. And also, another thing that this bill talks about is revoking economic development opportunities through like loans or financial gains or technical assistance. It will further involve other allies to block or restrict any aid from going to Ethiopia, which will create another problem. And then you also mentioned that people like me will be penalized, most of us in diaspora, from sending money back home, right? Whether it's investment or helping our family. And if we're viewed as undermining any negotiation efforts, right? So I'm also a true believer that, the main leaders of TPLF negotiation should not happen. So that I may be perceived as someone who's supporting the war. And then it's also restricts immigration if they're also viewed as supporting the war. So this is what we're going to be, I guess, this bill will do if it passes. So that's why we really need to fight it with all we have, right? It's time. We just started the Voter Voice campaign. It's a letter campaign that goes straight to, it takes 3 seconds. We've been sending it, to everybody we know. And basically you put your name and your telephone number, email, and address directly goes to our House representative and our 2 senators and the State Department and the White House. And that's a good way to combat any pressure on Ethiopia, because as a constituent, our vote matters. So we have to say something, and they will listen to us, because we're just going to talk and don't say anything. This bill is going to pass. I mean, it did pass the Foreign Affairs Committee. They didn't even bring it to Foreign Affairs Committee, to African Subcommittee. And now it's going to go to the whole floor. So I think 1 million Ethiopians are estimated to live here. If we have the right number, that we will make a big difference. So that's one. And then also PR, which contacting our representatives and having a meeting, which we've been doing in different states. So I think there's different ways and no more movement, of course. You guys are involved in that. So we have to make our representatives or our elected officials listen to us. And that's what I can say for now.
Great. Yeah, I just put in the Voter Voice campaign link. So for anyone who hasn't done it already, you just put in your name, your address, and I believe it's a zip code. So it tells you who you're writing to, because a lot of the times what we find is politicians are doing a bunch of different things, and they'll lean in the direction where they're getting more pressure. And so maybe, a lot of us have taken a little bit time off in the sense of being politically active on this issue, and then the other side never stops. So it's possible that that's what provoked this bill. But there's 2 other things that I think are really interesting that it brings back up, and I'll pose this question to Mesfin. This whole idea, again, like I said, it just keeps saying the government of Ethiopia should this and that, like that's all that it says. And then it also says they have to cooperate, the government, with independent investigations. So 2 issues that I think it keeps digging back up is this idea that an independent investigation is one that the U.S. is a part of, or the UN, which is basically the U.S. is a part of, and that the government of Ethiopia cannot do a credible investigation of what's happening on its turf. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is it digs up the State Department designating what's happening as a genocide, although this time they included genocide by parties to all of the conflict, which is basically the only place that you see the TPLF mentioned. But with that said, what I want to ask Mesfin is, you've been doing this work for a long time, same with Gennet and Nebiyu. How frustrating is it, or what does it signal to you when it feels like some headway is being made, and then there's this complete regression in terms of approach? It's almost like they just feel like they're just going to try it, and if it doesn't work, so be it. But there doesn't seem like there's this mutual negotiation happening.
Yes. First of all, you would think that, all of us, who are trying to really do something here, are trying to improve the relationship here between the United States and Ethiopia. We are doing whatever we can to just make sure, the interests of the United States and the interests of Ethiopia are both going hand in hand, and it's a win-win for everybody. And in order to do that, then you should have a policy. What we are confused is, we don't know what the U.S. policy is. We would like to have if you want to advance a policy, you have to understand that policy. So when we thought we understood it, then it's changed. So I don't know if there is an Africa policy, an American Africa policy. We don't know what that is. There is looks like there is a sort of a nice conversation going on between the new envoy, David Satterfield, and in his trip with the Ethiopian government, which means then there is it feels like there is a relationship that's being built, or at least to be built, based on all the improvements that happened in the last few months. All the reports that you mentioned, genocide, all that stuff is proven again and again that that's not the case. It's there is really no reason to just bring in the same thing again and again and try to turn it into a bill. So there is that problem. So what is the policy? What is that we are, what do we want to do? I mean, there is a democratically elected government, and do we want to help somehow and make sure that all the bad stuff stops happening in a friendly country, or do we want to have a different policy? So it really gets frustrating when you feel that you have, I think this thing is going the right direction now a little bit, and all of a sudden now, boom, one day you get up and then there is like a bill coming with absolutely all kinds of stuff in it that has no relationship with the reality on the ground. And honestly, at this point, I don't even know if how much of a dialogue has happened between the different bodies in the U.S. government before this bill dropped on everybody's lap. So it's frustrating. I wish there is a policy that everybody understands, and that makes sense to both entities. I mean, one-sided policy always will never work. The geopolitical situation in the world has changed, so my way or no way is not a way to go anymore. So yeah, it's just a lot of effort, and then going one step forward and coming one step backward, and it's just frustrating, Carmela.
Yeah, absolutely. I give so much credit to people that have been doing this for a long time, because to be able to stay hopeful, but also just kind of push along in times like these, I think is really commendable and frustrating. I don't know if there's an official policy on Ethiopia. It just seems like there's a group of people that are doing what they've been doing in general for a very long time, and there's no sense of like, okay, this isn't working, maybe we should evolve. There was that moment in January where we felt like maybe something was transitioning, but then it's just like right back to the same thing. And I would love to live in a world where relationships get better between countries and there's give and take and etc. But I'm concerned that I look at countries like Venezuela, who've been very resistant, socialist, so a different type of government, but in a sense, still trying to be very independent. And it doesn't seem like the U.S. has ever given in. It's just been, if we don't get it all, we're just going to try to punish you in every way possible. And I hope that that's not the case with Ethiopia. But based on how the current administration has been acting, it's a little bit concerning. But with that said, there's another thing that I think it's worth talking about is the general tone of the bill. And Mesfin, you kind of mentioned this in your last answer, but it has this weird paternal, like, you better do this, and then, or otherwise we're gonna punish. It's just such a, I don't know. Nebiyu, I know you've got some stuff to say on this. What did you feel when you were reading it?
Yeah, I mean, I had to read it over and over again, and you really have to read between the lines and really feel the intention, read the intention. Now, if the intention of this bill was to help, it would focus on capacity building in the country, not on demand and compliance. It would be focused on capacity building, on supporting local driven efforts, lending a hand to help strengthen the nation, the people, its institutions to solve this complex problems. But the way this bill is drafted is very typical of how Africa has been treated by the West. The overall tone is, like you said, very paternalist. The spirit and intention of the bill is very disrespectful. And this is consistent on how African nations and many global South nations have been treated. It reflects a relationship that is not equal. It sends the message of a nature of a relationship that is founded on disrespect because it has an assumption of incompetence. They don't come in with respect. They come in more like a wrecking ball that they're here to show you how primitive your ways are, with a complete lack of respect for indigenous knowledge, a complete lack of respect for indigenous ways of life. So if you really read it carefully, the assumption is, and if I can be frank, is this dumb Africans don't care. We just need to come and corral them into submission. That's the tone this bill carries, and it's an utter disrespect. And this is the type of bias that comes out in policies and in practices, and how the West engages with Africa. And this is not necessarily unconscious bias. It's more like an assumptive truth. It's presumptive, based on stereotypes and embedded belief in hierarchy. This is really a full display of institutional racism at a global level. So I think it's so ingrained in how they address the African continent that sometimes I don't even think they themselves are aware that they're doing it. But that's a deep problem. This is how they're setting the tone against Africa on the world stage. And this is deeply concerning. So that's the tone that the bill carries, and that's all the demands are in there, are basically consistent with this tone. And this is something that really we have to say no more to, and break this, and not let this continue to the next generation. I mean, enough is enough. Africa has come up with 1.3 billion people, the youngest population in the world. There's no reason Africa, Ethiopia, should be treated as such by anyone.
I think you just said it like it is. I mean, that's just what it is. I don't think it serves us. I mean, there's people that are very diplomatic, and we need those people, but I also feel like there needs to be people that say things just that bluntly, because whether they know it or not, that's what it is. And unless somebody tells them, then I think that there's no reason for them to have to change. One of the things I've been thinking about is midterms are coming up. In some states, the primaries start, I believe, in March. And it seems to me, non-expert political analysis, that maybe these groups are trying to secure certain bases. They probably have been lobbied for a very long time. I know for sure a local congressman here, Brad Sherman and Gregory Meeks, have been targeted by a lot of the community here. So I wonder, one, what it's like during times like these, right? As midterms are coming up, or the presidential election or the general election is coming up. One, it doesn't that make it even more important and give us some leverage to make sure that we do the voter voice, we reach out to the Congress folks, because they need to know that there's so many more people that whose votes they can lose if they push towards this. Gennet, I'm going to pose that comment/question to you.
Yeah, you're right. It will definitely make a difference, and they will listen to us because election time. And I don't know if you are familiar with Virginia, and that's exactly what we did last November. We organized as a community in October, and we invited some elected officials. And when they, I think, the loud voices that they hear because of whatever money they have, the TPLF supporters are reaching out to Meeks and Malinowski, and their, money is donated. So these people don't understand, because we've been basically talking to ourselves and not being vocal or sending letters or approaching any of these elected officials. They don't understand the extent of, the amount of really true Ethiopians, pro-Ethiopian people exist in this country. So I think it was, and when we did that in Virginia, I think that's when the elected officials woke up. So I truly believe that we have to show our numbers. And APAC, Mesfin can even go into details. So we have identified different states that have election coming. And we've also identified in states like some states, like, there's going to be Republican no matter what, whatever you do, we're not going to waste time. But states like Virginia, states like Georgia are where we can make a difference, where we have a large number. So, and so that's what we're focusing on. Even in Virginia, there's 11 districts, but we're only going to focus on 2 or 3 where we think our votes will make a difference. So I think we're becoming strategic. We've been meeting with the APAC group and trying to strategize and trying to galvanize Ethiopians in different states. So hopefully people will be energized and understand that it's not a choice anymore to sit back and not do anything. You really have to get involved and vote and make your voice known. But I also want to, Hermela, for 1 minute, to go back to this bill that we currently have, HR 6600. This proposed bill, if you look at it, they actually put 4 conditions that the Ethiopian government needs to meet for not to face punitive sanction. Number 1 is cease all offensive military operations related to the civic war and other conflicts in Ethiopia, right? We've already met, this was already met by the Ethiopian government when it declared unilateral ceasefire in June, and to give opportunity for peace, but TPLF thought it was a joke and continued to expand its fighting to Amhara and Afar. And the same thing now in December, after they pushed TPLF back to Tigray, and the Ethiopian government did not go in, but they're still fighting. So Ethiopian government actually, if the lawmakers, the so-called, Malinowski or any of these people, if they have been following up that this criteria has been met. And then the second step that the condition says is take steps towards negotiation and legitimate inclusive political dialogue. And clearly, as you can see, these few days, they have taken giant steps like releasing political prisoners like opposition party like Jawar Mohammed and Iskandar Nega, and also the founder and creator of TPLF, Sabahat Nega. So despite huge opposition by the majority of Ethiopians. So this also, Prime Minister Abiy is trying to create a win-win inclusive strategy, and there's also dialogue that's actually going on right now. And the third thing they're talking about is continuously allowing unfettered humanitarian access. And as we all know that they actually shell bombing, they're stopping in Abale, Afar region. The Ethiopian government is willing to let the food in, but have actually created unfettered access, but the TPLF is preventing that. And then the fourth one that they put in is cooperation with independent investigations of credible like that, this gross violation of internationally recognized human rights, war crimes and crimes against humanity. But there's already been done by the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, but the UNHCR investigation has been done, and US has already accepted it. So, I mean, if we want to see, like, we're going to punish them because of these 4 conditions, those 4 conditions are already taken care of. So, I mean, I'm myself is confused what the HR 6600 intention is. So, and to go back to your question, we just need, starting March until the next election, we need to organize and galvanize our community to make our votes and our voice heard.
Yes, I think it's proven over and over again when we all really take something seriously and sign on to a certain project or, rallies, whatever the case, like it's definitely powerful. The numbers are there. It's just they're not seeing it consistently because also people have lives to live, understandably. But this is one of those moments I think that we all have to galvanize both on social media and in the streets. because these are the kind of measures that just take us backwards. And to your point, Gennet, a couple of the conditions were ceased all offensive military operations, which to me is just like, what does that have to do with you? Like, there's literally an armed group that is fighting the country and its people. So again, it's who is going to actually, I hate it. I mean, I hate it. I wish it would all stop in this moment. So by no means am I trying to glamorize it, but to not mention who they're fighting, it's they're making it seem like it's just a one-way fight. And we know, actually, especially recently, that fight has restarted into different regions. And then to your second point about unfettered humanitarian access, again, completely context lacking. That's something that concerns everybody, but leaves out any of the active fighting that's happening right now on the rebels end. The other thing that this bill gets into is social media censoring, which we've all seen happening to combat hate speech and disinformation in Ethiopia. The very people that have written this bill are queens and kings of disinformation. So it's really interesting that they're going to be the one that determine what's disinformation and not in Ethiopia. So when you see this, and I'll pose this to both Mesfin and Nebiyu, what does it tell you about how far, at least this group, and they're both Republicans and Democrats, by the way. I know we've started to say, like, you know, we should lean Republican, but I think it depends on the person. What do you think, Mesfin, to start with, when you see this kind of same, like, what they don't want to learn or grow, it seems. They just want to keep the same narrative. Oh,
yeah,
there you go.
Yeah. I mean, it's very strange. You know, really, it's very strange. In a place where you have a lot of educated people, a lot of lawyers, people who can think and do something better. I mean, if you want to pass a bill, study the issue, for a change, if you want to go be so serious, let's just keep the lobbyists out. You know, this is people's life. We are making a determination on a country's fate, 110, 150, 120 people's life, and let's just be reasonable a little bit about that, right? You know, everything that Gennet articulated and everything that Nebiyu stated, you know, all those things come into play, and you wonder what is going on. No, so you know, I think it boils down to, one is, you know, we just have to make sure that, one, there is a constituent, there are people who care about what they do, and then we pay taxes, we vote for you, we put you in offices, and we watch what you do. It's our civic responsibility to get organized and get you out of office if that's what needs to be done. And then people need to understand that. That way, it's you know, it's just not only the lobbyists writing the law now. It will be the legislators actually, you know, the staff writing the law. And so in this case, you know, we would have to do whatever it takes to get that message out. On Sunday, we have sent some local Malinowski constituents where he was trying to, you know, present himself as this champion of the people to go and challenge him. And he was visibly irritated because some of the people who went and asked basic question, what is that? What kind of bill is that? Why did you put that bill out? And he was very annoyed. And we are going to have a whole group of people demonstrating next week. It's going to continue. So we are going to exercise all of our democratic rights to explain to him, to tell him that he was wrong. He was wrong in writing the bill. He was wrong in pushing it. He was wrong when he put genocide first. And, whatever is in his mind, whatever intentions he has, he may have the best intention in the world, but he is so wrong that we are going to just make sure that he understands that he's wrong. If that means, our campaign leads to him not get reelected, who is actually really has a very narrow margin for re-election, and also with redistricting, his margin is even narrower. So be it. So, I mean, and then this has to be something that we have to know, and we have to make sure that we do, so that mistakes like this don't happen again and again and again and again. I mean, there has to be consequences for this kind of actions that the whole world disagrees. I mean, nobody, these are elected officials. These are not kings. These are not gods. These are people who are given vote to work for the people, for us. And then we need to be listened and be explained when things like this take place. So we also like to support, the relationships. We really want to make sure that there is a smooth relationship between the United States, Ethiopia, the United States, the Horn of Africa, the United States, and Eritrea, because it's good for us. We have relations there, connections there. It's good for the United States because you have a better control over the geopolitics of that area if you have a good relationship, a respectable relationship with that country. So, I mean, where this is going is, whether we like it or not, the West has to learn that there is no order. There is a new world where people, we just have to change our strategy. We just have to say, hey guys, we understand you. This is give and take now. It's not one way or my way anymore. We get it. Let's talk development. Let's build projects together. We have better science, better technology, more money than anybody else, and we are a better partner than maybe even the guys coming from the east. And let's work together. It's the only way out. I mean, otherwise, if we are putting together bills overnight like this, try to scare people and alienate all of your supporters within the country, and do mess up stuff like this. I mean, it's really bad policy. In my opinion, it's very un-American to do that for legislators to pass such legislation.
Yeah, we're all hoping that they recognize the new order, but I don't know. I don't know if that's the case. But I think to your point, you cannot, I think emotions and politics don't work well together, meaning that we could get really frustrated by this. It sounds insane, completely misguided, out of context, or you could actually do something about it. And I once again put the Voter Voice campaign link in the comment section. So if you guys have not filled it out, it takes 2 minutes. That's what we mean in terms of action. They need to see some sort of a feedback, or else they really don't have any reason to change their behavior. Nebiyu, to the point about the social media censoring, it specifically calls on the US government to censor social media based on what they think is disinformation on Ethiopia, which is just, I mean, it's mind-blowing like so many other things. But what do you think about the language on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's worded to give the appearance that the intention is to carve hate speech and disinformation, and we all want hate speech to go away, to be monitored, and disinformation to be carved. But like you said earlier, who in this conflict has spread more disinformation than CNN and New York Times, right? But what has happened over the past months is we've seen the silencing and the censoring of advocates and activists who are advocating for Ethiopia. Eritreans, Somalis, Ethiopians have consistently been banned and harassed online for speaking their mind or for speaking the truth. So what this bill makes it is it gives it a legal ground to basically silence people that have a different opinion or people that resist or oppose the policies of the Biden administration. And this is really counter the First Amendment rights as American citizens we all have. And this should be something that deeply should concern every American. This is a slippery slope, and that this isn't something that should be seen very lightly. I do want to address, speaking of language and disinformation, this bill in itself has a whole lot of disinformation in it. So why don't we start from there? Even the way it characterizes the situation in Ethiopia, it calls it the civil war and other conflicts in Ethiopia. All right. So the situation in Tigray is called a civil war. The situation everywhere else in Afar, Amhara, Oromia, Benshangul is a conflict. Why? Because they don't want to label the TPLF an insurrectionist or a terrorist organization. So it's referred to as a civil war. This is not a civil war. At best, this is an insurrectionist. At worst, this is a terrorist attack on Ethiopia. So even that needs to be corrected. This is a conflict, and the reality on the ground is not reflected by this bill. There has not been a conflict in Tigray on the ground since June, but there's been devastations in the Amhara region, just like what the Amnesty International report said: rape, killing, mass killing, over 3,000 hospitals destroyed. The word Amhara is not even mentioned on this bill. Afar is completely being overtaken right now for the third time. People are being devastated. The word Afar is not even mentioned on this bill. Other conflicts where you have other organizations, terrorist organizations like the OLA, targeted killing of Amhara civilians in Western Oromia and Benshangul. No concern for that, right? So this shows the consistency of this selective outrage that continues to give us the impression that this administration's policy gives preferential treatment for the TPLF. And this is why, there's consensus in the Ethiopian and in the African community that the current Biden administration's policy is one that seeks a regime change in Ethiopia to put back the TPLF puppets back into power. And this is something that people are speaking up with. The mainstream media has shut down these voices. So the people of Ethiopia, the people of the Horn, have taken this to social media, right? So this so-called hate speech, carving disinformation is coming to social media, and this bill is going to make it legal to basically silence these voices that are challenging the status quo, that are challenging this foreign policy that is destructive and that is unhelpful to no one, unhelpful to Africa, unhelpful to the United States. It's a waste of taxpayers' money. So this is being exposed on social media, and this bill comes right at the center of that to censor that information so the American people will not know what exactly is happening on the ground and what their government is doing overseas.
Yeah, I think the framing is a really good point. I didn't even really catch that, but usually if the foundation isn't right, the rest of it is not going to make sense. And I just want to also highlight that the language on who can be sanctioned is so broad. It could be any one of us that they think have helped in some material way or non-material way to continuing the conflict, which of course, based on the way they're framing it, is everybody here and so many other people that have been speaking out against this war. We're going to wrap it up. I appreciate everyone staying really patient with some of the technical issues. We're going to end it with Gennet with some wisdom of what people should be doing in this time. Just kind of staying focused, staying grounded, and taking some action, right? So how can people push back on this? And I know we've already talked about some of this, so it's going to be some.
Yeah. I mean, people have to be, everyone has to be involved and do everything under our power to make sure that we let our elected officials know. The more pressure we put on our elected official, the more pressure they're going to be to go back to the White House and State Department and say, no, my constituents are saying that, so they have to hear from us. You can't just sit home and do nothing. If there's anything you could do, write a letter, meet your representative to reject this dangerous bill. And I think we need to organize, we need to vote, we need to get politically active is what I would say. I mean, we know the TPLF tactic is using force and deceiving the international community. We've seen it with the famine, and now we're seeing the same thing to get international community's attention. But we really have to educate our neighbors, talk to people at our job, and help everyone understand what's going on. And we are all ambassadors, so we need to ask our elected officials to condemn the TPLF for these atrocities and what they're continuing to do, making them accountable. So I think we need to speak up. But thank you so much, Armella, for giving us a chance to be here. And we appreciate everything you do.
Thank you. You guys too. Really, really, it's a team effort. Just because I saw a few comments in the comment section, I just want to also remind people that may have different opinions that this is only for the TPLF and its diaspora allies. That's it. It's not for the people in Tigray. We've seen numbers that are insane, hundreds of thousands that may have died in this war. So it's really interesting to me, those who support it think that it will actually help them, and it just doesn't. Like, sanctions have proven that that's not the goal. So just keeping in mind that these kind of bills don't serve anyone, no matter which side you're on. If you're concerned about people in Tigray, this is not going to make it any better. It's actually going to make it more difficult on the region's poorest people. So check out the Voter Voice link. Thank you so much, Gennet, Nebiyu, and Mesfin, for taking the time tonight. And thank you, everybody, for joining in. We're going to get you some more light the next time you see this broadcast. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.